All right, so you had a pretty iconic song, right? About crack
Yeah.
and the effects it had on your neighborhood.
Woo.
Take us through the process of writing that song. Crack it up.
Wow. Well, that's when the 80s came around, and that's when the crack epidemic was outrageous. It was crazy. And, I was just, in my usual mode of walking through the house, thinking of something to write about, banging on the tables and trying to think of a hook and a topic. And I just did that a lot. And I was like, wow, that cracking up shit, that's something to talk about, man. But I wanted to do it where it was humor. I wanted it to be humorous, but serious at the same time. I know I had to make it funny and catchy. And I wasn't thinking about putting no limitations because I didn't know the game. I didn't know that, cursing and the topics that you choose is very sensitive. Politicians voting, I didn't know those things. I was just an artist. So I just wrote crack it up, and I knew the hook had to be catchy. So I was like, crack it up, put it in the pipe, then smoke it. And then, I would describe in my lyrics, some of the ups and downs and trials and tribulations that crack had brought on to, specific individuals in our community. So, yeah, I did that. Aaron loved it. I brought the idea to Aaron. He loved it. And, man, we knew we had a hit. We knew that we was on to something completely that Wiz, nobody's even thinking like this. Nobody's writing like this. No, this is going to blow. Aaron was very enthusiastic about that, and he did what he could to push that particular record. Unfortunately, there was some, blowback, from the industry and corporation. And I'm going to keep it real with you, man. Till this very day, I believe, and I studied and done some research, and I feel that song would have more than likely stopped people from smoking crack. I had people that came up to me and said, Wiz, because of that crack song, I stopped smoking. Because of that, I heard that song and made me look at myself. And I think that if the song had the ability or the opportunity to generate like we intended it to do, it would have put a whole nother spin on hip hop. It would have gave hip hop a whole nother direction, and writers would have been writing differently, and we would have been on a whole nother perspective of, uplifting the community and cleaning up the community and pointing out the things that bring the community down. At one point, I remember Ronald Reagan coming up with the slogan, just say no to crack, which was shortly after they banned me and kicked me off the radio and told Aaron, take the record down, and told Red Alert and Mr. Magic and Chuck Chill Out and all of them, don't play the record or else. And we went through a whole lot with that particular song, but I really think Ronald Reagan stole my idea and used it for his political agenda, because shortly after that they come up with just say no to crack. So I'm like, wow. And after that, my career pretty much was blackballed, pretty much was, we had to go overseas with our material, with my music and my work once that occurred.
Yeah,
so that crack it up.
Let's talk about that though, right? Because like the song got banned from the radio essentially, right?
Right.
And
right.
That just angered me, because when you look at the lyrics of the actual verses that you're talking about, you would have to be dumb to not know that you're being sarcastic. You're basically showing people this is what's going to happen if you use this substance.
Correct.
So I don't get where the disconnect came from at all. Like people, it gives credence to what people say, that people just listen to the beat in the chorus and that's it. You know what I mean? Right. That's it. Because it makes no sense. If you actually fully listen to the song, then you will realize that you're speaking out against it.
Correct. So with that being said, I'm sure the powers that be interpreted it the same way that we did, but they flipped it into a whole nother thing, because I really feel that they was afraid of me. Afraid of the next projects that I would come out with, or the next topics I would bring to the table of discussion, the next awareness that I will bring to the people and make them, give them something to think about or give them a whole nother way to look at something. I think that they foresaw the threat that I brought to the community with the advancement that I already had in my writing and my whole vocabulary. I think that they saw the threat that I posed, and they very quickly, said, "Hey, this guy's way ahead of his time, man. We still messing with the Sugar Hill Gang, man. This is before the Sugar Hill Gang, but this is the level that hip hop was on. While I was on talking about Crack It Up, the world was on the Sugar Hill Gang level of understanding. So they wanted to just control the momentum of hip hop. And when they was ready to bring certain things to the world, that's when they was going to do it and not before."
The third verse is the one that sticks out to me all the time because of what you're talking about. Like women, end up getting on their knees to basically feed their addiction, right? And I think it's something that people don't talk about enough, where you have some of the most beautiful women that were affected by this substance. And,
right.
And what they had to do or felt they had to do to feed that addiction.
Yeah, that tore a new asshole in the Black community. It just demoralized people. It just reduced people's humanity and common sense to a level of just not caring anymore. Just the lowest level that you could ever imagine someone going to. This is where it brought you at. This is how much of a victimized the community was. And yes, mothers would do anything. Brothers would do anything. So if I see the grown man do anything, I could. We already know where the sisters is going with that.
Right. So were you seeing the Latino community affected just as much as the Black community by crack?
I wouldn't say that. I would say the Black community was more affected by it. And the reason why I would say that, and the reason why I think that that's the reality, is because the Black community had more suffering. The Black community had already stuck in its own ignorance. They already didn't have no identity. They had an identity crisis. They didn't have no foundation where they could use that to unify themselves or empower themselves. They were always victims since they've been here. So they were most targeted, and they most were the ones who were more receptive to becoming, addicted. But the Latino community, I believe, from my experience, already had their culture. They knew where they were from. They knew where their language was. They had their own culture. So, and then they saw what it was doing to the Black community. And like I said, there was a little tension in those days between Latino and Black. So that was making the Latino feel more empowered just to see the Black community being subjected to that and being victimized by it. They didn't want to become a part of that. Mm-hmm. They already still had their identity, their culture, their pride. They was like, yo, man, what the hell? And that, I believe, is what helped a lot of the Latino community not become victims as much as the Black community.